Hey, I'm Jack O'Brien. I'm the editor-in-chief of Cracked.
Robert Evans. I run the personal experience article team and have another job title, which I have forgotten.
You just went to Iraq, Kurdistan?
Yeah, Iraqi Kurdistan. We took some home videos there, so this is basically just going to be a slideshow of my vacation to the war in northern Iraq. Welcome to the city of Erbil, capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. It's called Kurdistan. The Kurds live primarily in Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Turkey, and they're the largest ethnic group in the world that doesn't have a country of their own. There's 25 million of them, but they have a chunk of Iraq that they've kept relatively nice. And they're not recognized as a country, so no one can give them aid, they can't take money, but they're on the ground, they function like a country. There's something called the Halabja massacre in 1988, which is when Saddam Hussein started launching chemical weapons into this town called Halabja and killed between 3,000 and 5,000 people. Thousands of villages just wiped out, but they're still digging up mass graves to this day. And during that point in time, the only reason the world heard about what was happening is because Iranian and British journalists got footage of these massacres and then showed them to the world, and that's what kind of kickstarted the Kurdish cause for independence. So unlike everyone else in the world, the Kurds really like journalists.
And so they have these unofficial military fighters.
Yeah, the Peshmerga. The two main Kurdish political parties each control about half of these guys. So it's like if the Republican Party and the Democratic Party split the military down the middle. And sometimes they back in the 90s, they would shoot it out occasionally.
Now they're banding together to fight ISIS.
Yeah.
They're the one kind of military force in the world that's kicking ISIS's ass a little bit.
And one of the things that was so weird about it to me is they're all old guys. Like,
right.
Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah, why is that?
You're a Peshmerga for your whole life. So there's a war on and you spend 10 years fighting in the mountains, and then the war ends, you go get a job. And you do that for 15 years, and then there's another war, and you're like, well, I'm one of the guys who knows how to do this, so I might as well get my gun and go back up there. I met a doctor while I was there who told me a story of like a 71-year-old man who came in with glaucoma, or cataracts, sorry, in both of his eyes, like he couldn't see, and he needed to get his cataracts cut away. And the only thing he was concerned about was, when am I gonna be able to see again so I can go back to the front line and fight? It was like a 70-something-year-old man.
That's, again, some grizzled ass.
Yeah, grizzled ass.
Me look like such a pussy.
He obliged to fight against our enemy.
So that's General Hamid Effendi. He's 84, 85 years old. He's been fighting as a Peshmerga since he was a teenager, well over 50 years. And now he's fighting ISIS.
Essentially, part of their military is like old guys coming out of retirement, sort of like space cowboys. There were young people though, right?
Yeah. One of the guys we met, who we'll call by the pseudonym Wad, was a friend of my interpreter, who was, I think he was in his early 20s, he was going to college, and when the war started and things were going badly for the Kurds, he volunteered, and he got less than a week of training. He pretty much just got a gun and a basic course and how to work with a bunch of people and set up on the front line. But they sent him back once things got stabilized. The older Kurdish officers we talked to made a separation between the Peshmerga, which like were again like a lot of them were older, and the civilians who joined up and volunteered. Like they appreciated it, but those guys clearly were not seen in the same light, and they wanted to get them off the field as soon as they could because they weren't, trained fighters. They weren't ready to die. Which is, like, that's what Peshmerga means. Like, loosely translated into English, it means facing death or towards death, like people who walk towards death.
Wow. Again, pretty badass.
Yeah, no, they're definitely imposing some bitches.
And they're unofficial, like, to the point that you went over and they were like, hey man,
yeah,
check out this like rocket launcher we have strapped to this truck.
Yeah, so they have problems, like they don't have a whole lot of modern weapons. So what they've done in order to like make the stuff they have more mobile is they've strapped their giant rocket launchers to the back of Toyota Hilux trucks. We're less than a mile away from ISIS's frontline positions. Mosul is about maybe 7-8 miles away. Right there is a town on the outskirts of Mosul that is controlled by ISIS. If you see this village over here, they've attacked recently, and the Peshmerga in this position fought them off and have been fighting them off. Just got the impression that they were gonna do it anyway at some point. They had this thing ready and they were just waiting to go see if it worked, and they were like, oh, some Americans are here. This will be fun for them. Come watch us try and blow up this concrete factory. Shattered every window in the vehicle, like the instant it fired.
It seems like you liked these soldiers that you chilled with.
Yeah, like it's any journalist's job to try and keep as much impartiality as they can, and I don't want to be like tooting their horns too much, but they were just really legitimately likable dudes. The Peshmerga, not only were they like super friendly and fun to be around, but they clearly consciously wanted to be fun to be around. Like
Right.
they were talking, like when they would talk about their religion or how much, you know, their faith meant to them, they'd also be like, but you know, we drink whiskey sometimes, I like to gamble, like we're
Right.
Muslim, but we're not too strict about it,
Right.
like we're cool dudes.
They're like the chill uncle.
It's interesting. Our interpreter, IR, told me a story that he felt bad a lot of the time because he wasn't fighting up at the front. He didn't volunteer. Like he saw his sort of service as doing this job, as taking journalists up to the front line and helping them get their stories and whatnot. He felt like that was the best contribution he could make. But he told me once that he was talking to one of the soldiers he met up at the front and said, you know, I feel bad when I'm having fun with my friends, when I'm back in town enjoying a night, because I know you guys are out here fighting just a few miles away. And he said the older Peshmerga was like, well, that's why we're out here fighting, is for you guys, so that you can grow up and make something of this place. Like, we're out here holding the line so that this experiment can continue. They're fighting for their kids to have a chance to figure out stuff for themselves. Like, that was the overwhelming impression I got, was they knew that the times were changing. They weren't fighting that. They just wanted to make sure that their people were alive to keep changing with the times.
They specifically said, we know that the times they are a-changin'.
No.
You told us you wanted to go to Iraq. I didn't just like send you there against your will. And in fact, I didn't want you to go at first. You explained to me something about Iraq that I didn't know, that you were going to the nice part.
I expected the nice part of Iraq to be a pretty low bar. I have like legitimately visited parts of the world on vacation that were less comfortable. Like I felt safe going out alone at night. My camera woman / fiance felt safe going out alone in the evening, unveiled as a woman, which we wouldn't have done her going out alone in New Delhi. There were like restaurants and bars and hotels and malls and like people drinking coffee in cafes on the street and like going on dates and going to the gym, just like living a life that would have been perfectly recognizable to anyone watching this video. Like I had 3G cell reception the whole time.
And yet you never called.
I went to a liquor store that had one of the best whiskey selections. In like a little corner store, they had Talisker and like 4 different types of Lafroig, Glenfiddich.
It sounds like I don't drink whiskey. It sounds like you're just making random noises with your mouth. How are the values over there in terms of like gender relations, racism, things like that?
Yeah, it's a weird clash of like modern and also like really old sort of tribal attitudes. So women go around unveiled. My camera woman was obviously a woman and she didn't wear a veil, was never looked at badly or anything like that. Our translator one day was a young woman who spoke Arabic. She wore yoga pants and like a t-shirt the whole time.
Cool.
But she told me a story about when she's at university, she and her friends smoke cigarettes too, but they can't smoke with the boys because it's frowned upon for women to be smoking in public, so they have to go off into the trees a little bit to smoke. So like there's still that weird divide. And we were sitting down, we had a wonderful lunch at one point. All these old generals and colonels and whatnot sat down with us and filled the floor up with like huge cuts of lamb and couscous patties and just delicious fucking food. And we all got to talking and joking, and they started joking about how many wives each of them had. And this guy's like, I have 4, he only has 2.
Like a joke, or they actually had it?
They said they actually had it, and these were like the older
really?
guys. And the younger guys would generally say, no, I just have the one wife. Because like one of the guys we met, who was just in his early 40s, he coordinated airstrikes for the coalition. He's the guy firing the rocket in the video. He had one wife, and he and his wife lived in the UK, and he would go over and fight for a while, and every now and then she would come back and fight. He had pictures of her on his phone with a machine gun. She was watching the kids, but in a few days she was going to be back at the front. The president of the Kurdish regional government is a guy named Masoud Barzani, and he's just overstayed his term in office. It's like if Obama was like, I'm gonna take another like 6 months, guys. I just got some shit to wrap up. So he's not like being a dictator in the sense of the region, like he's not like doing what Assad does and executing tens of thousands of people. But also overstaying your term as president is kind of a dictator-y thing to do.
Right.
Europe has taken in about 1.3 million refugees so far, and it's caused like an uncountable political shitstorm that's going on to this day, like whether or not, how many more we should take, this is too many. The Kurds have taken in 1.8 million refugees, and there are only 5 million Kurds in Kurdistan. They're looking at taking in another 1.5 million. And they don't get internet, they're not a government, so they don't get aid from the US government in the forms of money normally. Like that's recently starting to change, but like for the last couple of years, they've been taking in millions or hundreds of thousands of refugees, essentially bearing the cost themselves just because it's the right thing to do. The other side of that is like we're worried in the US, we're taking in 10,000 Syrian refugees, something like that, maybe 20,000, and people are terrified, like what if a terrorist gets in? Well, the Kurds are worried about that too. Not only have they taken in an order of magnitude more people, but it's a lot easier for ISIS to smuggle a true believer into Kurdistan 5 miles away from their border than it is into the US. We met a family while we were there who talked about how they'd lost like 4 family members to ISIS executions, 3 of them on the day of their wedding, like a mom and like a young bride and husband. And then told me that their 17-year-old son, when they got to Kurdistan, was just taken by the Asaish, the Kurdish FBI, basically. And they don't know what happened to him. They may never know what happened to him. Presumably the Asaish thought that he had joined ISIS or was sympathetic. Maybe he was, because they told us that he had been working. He was the only one in their family who could afford who had a job, who was bringing in money. And they didn't seem to have, like, who knows what was going on. And it's possible, like, they certainly believed he was innocent and were very, like, broken up about this. But there's really no way to know what was happening. And with another 1.5 million people coming in from Mosul in a flood all at once, like, it's not, stories like that aren't gonna become less common.
So overall, what would you say your impressions of that part of the world were?
This is the only time I've ever felt hopeful. The only news I've seen out of that region of the world that makes me feel like not only is someone gonna beat ISIS, but the people who are gonna beat ISIS are like definitively better than they are and better than what came before. Like it's a decent group of people who are winning in that part of the world and keeping civilians safe at the same time.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching that brand new personal experience video from Robert Evans and the personal experience team. It's a brand new division of the site that we're launching. We're going to be doing a lot more personal experience videos in the future, so stick around.
I have nothing to add.